Birdie found the head in her refrigerator when she was making breakfast on Saturday morning. It was behind the milk. She dropped the milk and screamed, and then it screamed back, and then she slammed the door shut on it. She picked up the half-empty gallon of milk and put it on the counter. She started a pot of coffee and sat down at the kitchen table and stared at the fridge. She was pretty sure that there hadn't been a head in the night before, though she hadn't looked behind the milk, but surely she would have noticed, wouldn't she? She could hear sounds coming from inside the fridge still, someone talking to her rather loudly to be able to be heard through the door, she guessed. It definitely hadn't spoken to her the night before. She waited until she had a cup of coffee with a dash of milk and a few spoons of sugar, and then opened the door again to put the milk away. Oh, thank you. Please don't. She closed the door with the milk in front of her head again and sat down to drink her coffee. There was a talking head in her fridge. It seemed polite enough, but it was still, well, a head. She could hear it getting a bit louder, so she took her coffee to sit the she took her coffee to the deck and sat in the shade and listened to the birds for a while. There had been a lot of strange things that she'd had to deal with since she'd moved into the house. Most of them were easy enough to get around. Just avoid certain rooms during certain times and pretend nothing else was wrong. Throw a few pounds of raw meat into the small room in the back of the cellar every few days and fill the bowl of water if it had been shoved through the flap door. Little things. She couldn't avoid her fridge. Unless maybe the head would only be there at certain times. She could avoid the fridge during certain hours of the day if that's what she needed to do. Start using powdered creamer for her coffee in the morning, maybe. No, that wouldn't do it at all. She'd had to give up too much already to live here. She wasn't giving up the milk in her morning coffee. She went back inside, poured herself another cup, and set it on the table. Then she opened the fridge again and grabbed the milk. Hello, can you see me? Please don't shut me in here again. She let the door fall shut and fixed her coffee and then set the milk on the counter. With a sigh, she opened the door. Please, can you see me? The head was sitting inside one of her cake pans, lined with tin foil with tongs locked in place in the back of the head and wedged into the bottom of the pan to hold it upright. It looked to be cleanly cut from its body. The head appeared to be that of a middle-aged man with mousy brown hair and a goatee with whispers of gray sprinkled in. Milky blue eyes stared out at her, wide and frantic, and its teeth were toothpaste commercial white. Ding! When it opened its mouth to shout at her. Stop! She pointed at it. Just for a minute. I can see you. I'm going to take you out and set you on the table, and then we're going to talk. It started to open its mouth again. I said stop, or I'll shut you back in there again. Once it closed its mouth, grumbling under its breath, and how was it breathing? She picked up the cake pan, set it over on the table across from her coffee, put the milk away, and sat down to stare at it. So what's the deal? Who are you, and why are you in my fridge? I'm Stanley. I have no idea why I was in your refrigerator, but it's very cold in there and dark. I think you have something that expired recently as well. Maybe some turkey? Stanley looked up at her and shrugged his eyebrows. Thanks. I'll give it a spot. He seemed to tolerate anything. When did you end up in there? Why did you end up in there? I'm not quite sure. I don't think it's been terribly long, but I am very cold. I remember being at a party, then things get hazy. I must have blacked out for a bit, but I do recall waking up and being brought into your kitchen and wedged up on this pan. They threatened to stab my eyes out if I made any noise. And then they put me in the fridge. Then nothing but silence and cold until you opened the door, he said. You realize you're just a head, yes? Unfortunately, yes, but I don't recall how that happened. Do you think I was put in there to keep me from decaying? I don't want to decay. Maybe you should keep me in the crisper. Would that help? Stanley looked worried. I'm not keeping you in my crisper. I don't want to keep you at all. Do you know who brought you into my home? Birdie hadn't heard a thing the night before. Granted, she'd been rather drunk, and there was a distinct possibility that she had left the door to the deck unlocked after she'd come in from outside listening to her music on her headphones. If she tried to listen to music anywhere inside the house between midnight and 5 a.m., all she was able to hear was ragtime bands, thanks to the lady in the drawing room, so she used her deck during the warmer months. No, they were wearing a mask and a cloak. They had a very low voice and terrible cuticles. It took them a while for me to get me to stand up. No regard for my comfort at all, just manhandling my face as they tried over and over to get something that would keep me propped up. You might want to wash the rest of your utensils. I think they just put back anything that didn't work in the drawer. I certainly didn't hear the sink being used, Stanley said. Birdie grimaced and got up, loading her dishwasher with everything from her silverware and random cooking utensils drawers. What's your last name? Do you have family? Anyone who might be looking for you? Stanley paused and thought for a moment. Not that I can recall. I'm actually not sure my name is Stanley, but that's what the person who put me in there kept calling me. If you make noise, I'll take out your eyes, Stanley. I hope you don't catch a cold, Stanley. Just imagine sneezing like this. Be sure to give the little birdie our message, Stanley, and you might just get your body back. I don't suppose you have a parakeet or something? Birdie had frozen at that last statement. You have a message for a birdie? What's the message? What did they tell you? I think that's supposed to be between me and the bird. I thought maybe they were taunting me. How would a bird give them an answer? I'm the bird. My name is Birdie. Now, what did they tell you to tell me? That's a very unexpected name, I'm sorry, Stanley said. Though maybe you should have introduced yourself when you took me out. Manners and all that. They said that I was supposed to tell you that if you let them meet in the woods by the little shack on nights when there's a new moon and stay off of your deck and mind your own business, they'll leave you alone. If not, you can expect more trouble. They would also appreciate a couple of cases of cold beer left in the shack, as it's quite a hassle to carry everything into the woods. Then something about taking care of your ragtime gal if you did something. I can't remember. It was very confusing, and I wasn't perhaps paying the best attention. Suddenly being ahead and being told you need to pass a message to a bird is rather overwhelming, you know? Did they tell you how I was supposed to reply to them? Bertie asked. Like I said, I wasn't really paying attention. I thought they were mocking me. Something about the shack, but I don't know exactly. Stanley shrugged his eyebrows again. Do you think they really kept my body? I hope it's cold too. Is there a deep freeze in this shack? I might get a bit whiffy if there isn't. Bertie was looking at moon cycles on her cell phone. Tonight's a new moon, thankfully, so I probably can just drop you off then. You're a rather useless messenger, you know? Did they specify what type of beer? Stanley goggled a bit at her. You're taking this all rather calmly. After the initial screaming, that is. Do you often get messages from talking heads? Bertie was glaring at him. I remember something about Heineken when they were discussing it on the way here, although someone mentioned Guinness as well. Of course they wouldn't be fans of Keystone. I have cultists with taste in my woods, Bertie muttered to herself. To answer your question, no. But a lot of weird shit happens here. You're just one of many things I've had to deal with in the past year. What about my body? Is there a freezer? Stanley asked urgently. I have no idea. I've never entered the shack. It just seemed begging for trouble, and I have enough already. Time to put you back and go shopping, I guess. Are you sure you can't remember anything more about the ragtime gal? And no, it seemed like a bunch of nonsense at the time. What do you mean you're putting me away? I have to go buy them some beer. Do you want to take a chance at decomposing? Stanley seemed to try and shake his head vehemently. I almost forgot about that. Please put me back. Although, could you give me a light? Maybe some music? Bertie picked up the cake pan and stuck it in the fridge, this time in front of the milk. Are you sure I shouldn't be in the crisper? She shut the door and sighed again, then went to get ready for shopping. In the late afternoon, Bertie entered the shack in the woods. She was hauling behind her a cooler filled with Heineken, Guinness, ice, and, sitting atop it, a smaller cooler with Stanley tucked inside, making quite a ruckus. There was indeed a large freezer there, though she didn't look inside of it. She hadn't realized there was electricity running out into the shack. It must have just rolled onto her electric bill from the main house. She took out a pen and hastily added, If you bring out a refrigerator, it will be much easier to keep the beer supplied, to the note she had written for the cultists. She had agreed to let them have the woods to themselves and provide them with beer, told them that Stanley was rather useless, and asked for more information about the deal for the ragtime gal, as she really wanted to be able to listen to music on winter nights without having to go outside. She said she hoped the reply could be with a note this time rather than another head. She provided them with a notebook and a fresh pack of pens, as well as some tape. She opened the lid to Stanley's cooler. He was making as much noise as he could with a sock stuffed in his mouth. She waited until he stopped trying to talk and then picked him up and held him close to her face. If you get your body back, do not come back to my house. I don't want to see you again, any part of you. If I see you, I will feed you to Spot. You can let them know that as well. He made a last valiant effort at spitting the sock out and speaking. Do you want me to staple the note to your forehead? Leave you sitting out here for something else to eat before they get here? I can't rely on you to give them my reply, so at this point it's up to you. Do you understand? Stanley made what sounded like an acknowledgement, and she stuck him back in the cooler and set it atop the larger one full of beer. Birdie walked back home before the sun started to set and prepared herself for an early night with no music. She still had to feed Spot, unload her dishwasher, set up the dolls in the pink room for a tea party, and, as it was Saturday, put 3 oranges into the linen cupboard on the second floor. She was still learning all the ways of the house. Maybe this cult or whatever they were could help her once they became more comfortable with her around. They seemed to know about her music problem. For now, she could go back to trying to figure out how to make the stomper in the attic stop making such a racket. Maybe some slippers would help. Some really thick slippers.